In every city, there are stories that never made the papers. Not because they weren't important, but because they were inconvenient. They live in forgotten files, in half-finished investigations, in questions no one wanted answered. This isn't where justice always wins. This is where the echoes remain. This is Reverberating Noir. There's a sound that doesn't leave you. A scream. Sunday afternoon. Bloomsbury. 1877. Sunlight through lace curtains. A teacup. And then that.
The neighbor heard it, felt it in her chest. Her own teacup hit the floor. And then, nothing. No one came running. No one knocked on the door. In respectable London, you didn't. You pretended. You looked away.
That choice, that single quiet choice to look away, cost a woman everything.
Welcome to Reverberating Noir. I'm Nina Jovovich.
And I'm Adam Jones. Tonight, we're going somewhere dark. A coal cellar in the heart of London. 1879. And a question that never got a clean answer. Who killed Matilda Hacker?
And maybe more importantly, why did it take a year and a half for anyone to even look?
Let's set the scene. London. 1879. Gaslights. Cobblestones. Horse-drawn cabs rolling past boarding houses where ladies took tea and gentlemen read the papers. Respectability wasn't just valued in this world. It was armour. The only armour most people had.
And 4 Euston Square fit that picture perfectly. A boarding house run by Severin Bastendorff. Cabinet maker, family man, landlord to quiet, professional, single women. The kind of place your aunt would feel perfectly safe staying.
Perfectly safe.
Among the tenants, a woman who called herself Miss Ooish, eccentric, reclusive, paid in cash, kept to herself, carried a small bag that she guarded closely. Her real name was Matilda Hacker, a spinster from Canterbury. The kind of woman Victorian society acknowledged only long enough to whisper about, and then forgot entirely.
Until the coal dust gave her back.
May the 9th, 1879. 2 workmen, a coal cellar, shovels scraping through the dark, and then that sound. Not coal, bone, wrapped in sacking, tied with rope, buried beneath a year and a half of soot and silence.
Bone, sacking, rope. She'd been down there the whole time, while the house above her kept its routine, while tenants came and went, while tea was served and curtains were drawn, and the world called itself decent. She was underneath it, waiting.
The identification took time. Forensic science in 1879 was still finding its footing, but they got there. Her clothing, her teeth, the testimony of the few who'd known her as Miss Ooish, Matilda Hacker. Last seen alive October the 14th, 1877. 18 months in the ground before anyone found her.
And here's the thing that stays with me. She wasn't found because someone looked. She was found because someone needed coal.
That's the part that should disturb people more than it does. She wasn't discovered through investigation. There was no inquiry triggered by her disappearance. No official concern raised when a woman simply ceased to exist from a boarding house in central London. She was found by accident, by 2 men doing their job on an ordinary morning.
Which means if they'd needed coal a week later or a year later, she might still be there.
Or never found at all.
The investigation moved fast once the bones were identified. It had to. The press was already circling, and the trail, such as it was, led almost immediately to one name. Hannah Dobbs. Bastendorff's servant girl. Young. Working class. Invisible in the way all servants were invisible in that world, until she wasn't.
Hannah had done something that investigators couldn't ignore. After Matilda Hacker vanished, she'd pawned jewelry, a brooch, a watch, items that had belonged to the dead woman. Items that only someone with intimate, private access could have taken.
Motive. Opportunity. Evidence of theft. On paper, the case looked clean.
It was never clean.
No. But before we get to why there was something else, something that turned a disappearance into a killing even before the bones were found, a stain.
When Matilda Hacker vanished, Mrs. Bastendorff had looked into her empty room, and there it was a dark patch on the carpet. Months later, when the investigation opened, a doctor examined what remained of it. His verdict was careful, measured. The way doctors in that era tried to be. Human blood.
Not definitive. Not enough to convict on its own, but enough to shift everything. Enough to say whatever happened in that room, it wasn't quiet.
And yet that room had been cleaned. Relet. Lived in by someone else. The stain was almost gone by the time anyone looked. Almost.
July 1879. The Old Bailey. Hannah Dobbs stood trial for the murder of Matilda Hacker. The courtroom was full, the press was hungry. And the prosecution built what it could. The pawn jewellery, the access, the opportunity. But the defence held its ground. She stole, yes. The evidence was clear on that. But murder? No weapon. No witness. No proof that Hannah Dobbs was the one who put that body in the coal.
And the jury agreed. Acquittal. Which, in a different story, might be where this ends.
But Hannah Dobbs wasn't finished.
Not even close. After the acquittal, a journalist named George Purkis found her. He wanted the real story, not the courtroom version. What she told him was printed in a 16-page pamphlet. The title alone tells you everything. The Euston Square Mystery. Extraordinary statement made by Hannah Dobbs. And in it, she named a name.
Severin Bastendorff.
She claimed they'd been lovers. A secret affair conducted beneath the roof of his own respectable household. And she claimed something else, that on the night Matilda Hacker died, she had been with him. And that what followed was not romance. It was fear. She described him as violent, controlling, and she said that when Matilda threatened to expose something about him, he killed her. And then he turned to Hannah and made himself very clear. Talk, and she would hang for it.
A servant girl, accusing the master of the house. In 1879, you have to understand what that meant. It wasn't just dangerous, it was almost unthinkable. The distance between their stations socially, legally, in the eyes of every institution that mattered was not a gap. It was a canyon.
And yet, the pamphlet sold. The press ran with it. Victorian tabloids, if you can call them that, consumed every word. Because this had everything: a secret affair, a murdered spinster, a body in the coal, a servant who'd been threatened into silence. It was the birth of something we still live with. The true crime-feeding frenzy. The public appetite for darkness dressed up as justice.
And Bastendorff was dragged back into court, not for murder this time, for perjury, because during Hannah's trial he had sworn under oath that he barely knew her, that their relationship was purely that of employer and employee. The truth was different. They had been lovers. He had lied. And for that lie, that single, provable lie, he received 1 year in prison.
1 year. Not for the murder, not for the body in the cellar, not for the bloodstain on the carpet or the 18 months Matilda Hacker spent beneath the coal, for lying about knowing a servant.
The system found what it could prove, and it punished that. Everything else, the bigger questions, the darker truth, those stayed in the dark where they'd always been.
And here's what I keep returning to. Bastendorff was cleared of murder. Hannah was acquitted of murder. So officially, legally, on the record, no one killed Matilda Hacker. She simply ended up in a coal cellar, wrapped in sacking, tied with rope. Been no one.
The street itself couldn't hold the weight of it. Euston Square, the southern end, where the house stood, was renamed in 1879. Quietly, without ceremony, Ensley Gardens. That's what it's called today. A new name for a street that couldn't keep its old one, because some addresses become too heavy to carry.
That renaming tells you something important about how institutions respond to this kind of exposure. Not with accountability, not with reform, with rebranding. Change the name, change the map, move on. The house is still there. The cellar is still there. The question of who killed Matilda Hacker is still there.
Let's talk about her for a moment. Not the evidence, not the trial. Her, Matilda Hacker, an unmarried woman from Canterbury who gave herself an alias in a city that wasn't her own, who paid in cash and kept a small bag close and didn't invite questions. We don't know why. We don't know what she was running from or toward. We don't know what was in that bag. We don't know what she knew about Bastendorff, if anything that might have made her dangerous to someone.
And that's the part that should haunt us. We know almost nothing about who she was before she became a victim. Victorian society had no real mechanism for caring about women like her, the unmarried, the eccentric, the ones who didn't fit the expected shape. She was the kind of person who could vanish and have it mistaken for simply leaving.
And that's exactly what happened. When she stopped appearing at meals, when her room went quiet, the assumption was that she'd moved on, gone somewhere else. People like Matilda were expected to drift, expected to be unreliable, expected to disappear.
Which is exactly what made her the perfect victim, not because of anything she did, but because of what the world around her had decided she was worth.
There's a pattern here that goes beyond one house, one murder, one city, in one century. The people most likely to be harmed are the people least likely to be heard. The servant who can be threatened into silence, the eccentric spinster no one will miss. The working-class woman whose word means nothing against a respectable man's. The system doesn't create that vulnerability deliberately, but it maintains it, quietly, consistently. And when something goes wrong, it looks for the smallest possible answer, the one that disturbs the least.
Hannah Dobbs stole jewelry. That's provable. That's clean. Convict her of that or something adjacent, and the story has a shape. Bastendorff lied under oath. That's provable. Punish him for that, and justice appears to have been served. But the actual question who killed Matilda Hacker and why that question doesn't have a clean answer. And the system, then as now, is not well designed for questions that don't have clean answers.
What most people miss about this case, what gets lost in the sensationalism, the pamphlets, the tabloid circus, is how ordinary the failure was. No one in that house was a cartoon villain. Bastendorff ran a legitimate business. Hannah Dobbs was a young woman doing what she had to do to survive. The neighbours who heard the scream and said nothing were following the social code of their time. The investigators who came late were working with the tools they had. And yet, a woman is dead. And no one was ever held responsible for that death.
That's the part that makes this case more than a Victorian curiosity. It's not about the gas lamps or the coal cellar or the corsets. It's about what happens when a society decides, collectively and without ever quite saying so, that certain lives are easier to lose than to protect, and then act surprised when they're lost.
The street got a new name. The house kept standing. The press moved on to the next sensation. And Matilda Hacker, whatever she was, whoever she was, whatever she was afraid of or hoping for, she stayed in the dark, the way the dark things always do.
Until the coal ran out.
If you've stayed with us this far, thank you. Truly. This is Reverberating Noir. We tell these stories because we believe they deserve to be told carefully, without spectacle, without exploitation. Just the truth, held up to the light, and the shadows it casts. If that's something you want more of, subscribe to Reverberating Noir. It means more than you know. It keeps us in the dark, doing this work. And the dark is where the real stories live.
We'll be back with another case. Another question that didn't get a clean answer. Another name that deserved more than it got.
I keep thinking about that scream. October 1877, a Sunday afternoon. Sunlight through lace. Someone heard it. Someone felt it land in their chest. Someone's teacup hit the floor. And then they chose silence, not out of cruelty, out of habit, out of the deep, trained reflex of a world that had decided some sounds were better left unheard. That choice didn't cause the murder, but it closed the door. And behind that door, in the dark, beneath the coal, a woman waited. For 1.5 years. For 2 workmen with shovels. For the accident of someone needing fuel on an ordinary morning. We tell ourselves we'd hear it now. We tell ourselves we'd act. I'm not sure we would.
Matilda Hacker was identified. She was buried. The case was tried twice and closed once. But the question of who killed her remains, officially, unanswered. And the conditions that made her killable, the invisibility, the disposability, the social machinery that turns certain people into people no one notices missing, those were never put on trial at all.
The recording ends here. But the case doesn't. Somewhere, the evidence still exists. The questions still wait. If this story stayed with you, if it followed you into the silence, subscribe to Reverberating Noir. Not for us, for the stories that refuse to disappear.
Because as long as something doesn't make sense, the truth is still out there. And someone will find it.
Until next time, keep listening to the dark.